Thank you all for coming. My name is Marc Van Norden. I'm the Vice President of Product and Engineering at Fox Broadcasting.
Chris Dixon, architect for Ixxus, and implementing the solution for Fox.
What I'd like to talk about today is just kind of a short timeline of Fox and our experience with Alfresco, but more from the business side, going back to 2008 and thereabouts. So Fox.com around 2008 was more of a marketing site, which was really meant to promote tune-in to live shows. We supported around between 24 and 30 different shows. We had 5 developers, and the CMS at the time was Alfresco, and it predominantly output code and content. And that was due partially to resourcing and also the skill sets that we had in-house at the time. It wasn't until around 2009, 2010 that we started to separate out the code from the content. So, it started to shift from just a marketing site, and digital integrations became more and more important as part of the ad sales mechanism. So, they would sell ad deals that were mostly on air, and then more and more the digital component of it became a piece of that entire package. So beyond just the marketing components of your photos page, your bios page, it became more about that custom integration for American Express or Honda or Toyota. Our dev team internally grew to be about 15 people, including offshore resources. So we were really getting to a point where we're actually able to manage and handle that workload. Again, working towards separation of code from content. And this is about the time where we really started to put more emphasis and focus on content creation. So, the teams were working with the showrunners to create more and more specialized content and pushing that out on a more iterative basis. Around this time, we also went through a UX update within the Alfresco WCM, which was more user-friendly now that we had different stakeholders in there providing content. Around 2011, there was a dramatic shift in our content strategy. So previously, it was a marketing site, but we did allow a certain number of full episodes available on Fox.com. Short form content was available on the site as well. It was not distributed anywhere else. Things like Facebook, YouTube, Hulu. We distributed to Hulu due to a partnership, but third-party sites, we did not put content out there very frequently. Around 2011, that strategy shifted, and we really started to push our content to where people were consuming video and not making Fox.com the ultimate destination. Around this time as well, the site really became more of a product offering. So we are a partner, one of the first broadcast networks to be a part of TV Everywhere, which is the authentication service, working with cable providers to provide long-form video over digital devices as well as websites. With that kind of changed the strategy. In 2011, we also changed out our video CMS, moving from Brightcove to the platform. And along with this, continuing to extend that paradigm of separating out code from content and going through a site redesign, we were able to kind of get to where we are today. 2012 really kind of opened up that paradigm. So with the launch of TV Everywhere, distribution of content to multiple platforms and understanding that people are consuming it in different ways, going into 2012, we launched a variety of native platforms, Xbox, Roku, Samsung, iOS, and Android devices. That footprint was basically managed by the same amount of people that we had internally. And so basically having Alfresco with the content and code separation experience that we kind of went through over the last couple of years, it allowed us to deploy this content to these endpoints while being published from one centralized location. And it was not necessarily a large hit internally to the amount of teams that we needed to staff up. So we were essentially publishing to the same amount of platforms, to the 5 extra platforms with the same amount of people. Going into 2013, that strategy is still expanding. We've got several other platforms that we're pushing out this year. So Windows has a couple. We will be on the Xbox One as that launches in the fall. What this has allowed us to do is, keep down our operation costs while expanding that footprint out in the marketplace. While using Alfresco to do most of that heavy lifting. And if you kind of look at the course of that 5-year span, it moved from Alfresco being a system which kind of did a lot of the heavy lifting from content and web development to modifying it to work in the model where we actually had developers who could handle the UI components, to having a system that not only published for web but then published across multiple platforms. And that's basically it.
So that's the portion of Marc's piece that then brings us into how are they using Alfresco Share to manage their photo set. A big portion of a media site is going to be their photos. And you look at the number of platforms they're looking at supporting, from web to responsive web, Android tablets, Android phones, Windows tablets, iOS devices, and Retina iOS devices. You get into a very large set of how many photos you need to cover and properly manage that set of everything. So you talk about what is Photo CMS. Photo CMS is photo management within Share. How do you take one master image and recut that for 12 different platforms, including Roku, Samsung smart TVs, and everything else, without making it a burden on your photo editors to edit one picture into 140 different pictures?
I think that's photo editor, singular.
Photo editor,
yeah.
Yes. So we built out what we're calling the Photo CMS, using primarily Alfresco Share with the built-in ImageMagick engine and a number of jQuery tools to help with that and make it simplified and reusable across multiple show sites and multiple devices. Keeping it a user-friendly experience has been really one of the key challenges to not recreate Photoshop or GIMP within Alfresco. You don't necessarily need an entire photo editing tool set, but a simplified version to get you through recropping of photos or slightly shifting of how you want things to look a little bit. If you're going to do some heavy lifting, go use the right tool. Go use Photoshop. One of the other key portions is gallery management. Alfresco as a whole doesn't yet really have an albums manager or a gallery manager. They are talking about collections and upcoming releases. So we've customized categories to be used as an album to allow for associations of multiple Alfresco nodes to a single category, edit the metadata on the category, and then publish the whole thing as an album. Rendition generation, renditions being the recut images that you're doing. You get 140 different renditions cut. There is a taxing on the CMS to accomplish that. Using ImageMagick, I think with the servers that we've got, it takes about 45 seconds to cut all 140 renditions on a JPEG or a PNG. You get into animated GIFs, and it becomes a two-step process with ImageMagick that's very taxing on the system, which enabled us to create it as a back-end service and run it either locally on a single Alfresco instance or farm that extra work out to a secondary simplified version of Alfresco that has most of the services turned off, so that the only thing that it's really doing is pushing out renditions. One benefit, though, is if you decide you're going to add another platform or a different photo size, is you can go into the CMS and create your rendition, which is a simple form. The next time you publish that photo, it will note that that rendition has not been generated and generated on the fly and publish it as it goes. Speaking of the simple form, the way that Alfresco currently handles renditions is you can define the XML in a bean and pull that in your context XML file. That became a heavy lifting task that required a new restart of the CMS every time they wanted a new rendition created. So we've provided a form to the content and product editors to allow them to select what options they want on there, from the width and the height to where do you want the focus done when we do the resizing, where do you want it to maintain aspect ratio versus cropping any piece off, and what type of background do you want when we are maintaining the aspect ratio. Do you want it to fill in with black, fill in with white, or allow for transparency because PNGs support that. We've also provided a MIME type option so that you can decide that you only want to supply 3 different sizes of GIF files or 3 different sizes of PNGs where everything else applies to every other type. So when it goes to generate those renditions, it won't generate 140 PNGs when you only wanted 3. This is the current American Idol rendition set of files. But American Idol is supporting 12 platforms, something like that. Anywhere from Xbox, Roku, smart TVs, and the entire list of across the board. You can take one master image and recut it to 140 different sizes. Choose this screen lets you review those sizes and make sure that the rendition, the image that we cut out for you is what you expect or what you want. 140 renditions is a lot to manage, but from a photo editor's view, they have one image they really have to manage. There's one master node to this, and these are all child nodes to that. So you're not viewing 140 copies of this. You're viewing one copy that has 140 options on it.
And I think part of the challenge really has been around the fact that we've had an app and a platform strategy that has been managed and developed by multiple groups. Our first year was really focused on the launch. As we get into year 2 and year 3, it will be about developing it in a much more aligned manner, defining the specs, the image renditions, and making sure that we're able to limit that. But fortunately, it has not been a massive impact on the photo editor.
So some of the times when the photo gets cropped, there's a particular part of the photo they really are looking for to be centered on or to really focus in on. So within the CMS, we gave them the option to recrop any photo. The very top portion there in blue on the right says thumbnails. From that drop-down list, you can select any of the renditions defined for that site. Renditions are defined per Alfresco share site and not general across the board for every show that you create. Fox.com doesn't need the same number of renditions that American Idol needs or X Factor needs or any of their other smaller show sites. But from this point, this is a jQuery plugin. You can move the yellow box to where you want it. The slider bar on the bottom allows you to zoom in or zoom out on the picture. And if you zoom in too far, the yellow box falls outside of the image itself into the black and white checkers. It will not allow you to crop within that space. You have to crop within the photo. And you can recrop on any of the renditions. It's not a recrop for all renditions. If you have a single custom image, which the biggest use case for Fox is adding additional text to an image to use it as the big hero carousel on the front page of Fox.com or American Idol, where they've added extra information to it, but it's only one rendition of this image that they're reusing. They can override any of the renditions individually by either uploading a new file or selecting a different file within the CMS to use as that rendition.
I think some of the reason why that we would need to be able to manage each single rendition is, we have these rules around the way the cast is represented. So you may have just a square cut for an iOS device, but if that shows up on an Xbox and someone's head is half cut off, we need the ability to go in and say, all right, we need to address this specific rendition for this specific use case, because those are the rules that we have to follow.
So again, going back, photo management, just to make sure that it's drag and drop. You still have the same user interface with Share that you do everywhere else. You want to drag files in and drop them in. That's what it's there for. That's the the benefit of the flexibility and simple use of Share. So we've piggybacked on that. Renditions are created as part of a service when you upload the image, and then on demand if you add new renditions to it. The capability to recrop and override thumbnails, and then gallery management with using categories. We've got categories to show up as folders, so you're not using the standard category manager. You can create what looks like a folder, but it's actually a customized category. It's a lot of work. And that's the end of my portion as well, which I think we're ample amounts of extra time, which with a large crowd, it's open for questions. But you're required to speak into a mic. And I'm going to be abused by my own team.
So, did you use any specific pipelining for managing the load? Because it's a significant amount of work that we're doing here on the Alfresco box. How did you regulate the processing activity?
The rendition engine that's been built to generate the thumbnails was limited in a context file by the number of threads that it can spin off. So I think we allow a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5. When you move it over to the separate box, we allow that thread count to be increased because there's no extra load on that server.
Was that asynchronously done?
Would have to ask Ezekiel.
So when you say photo, what kind of a file do you mean when you say a photo?
JPEGs, PNGs, and GIFs are the ones we're currently supporting.
Do you have plans to support different formats in your future?
I don't know if there's been any requests to support any other types at the moment.
Right now, there's no need to support any other types. I mean, the platforms that we're looking at, accept those types today. So.
It looks like a really good sort of generic framework for doing all sorts of kinds of mass image activity like that. Is there sort of scope for increasing, like for example, you had that jQuery widget for maybe doing some light touch-up work, for example, or corrections?
You definitely could. I mean, it's a matter of plugging in a jQuery.
I think our business is one that wants to keep that hands-on context as it relates to the representation of casting characters. Just as it relates to representation of any of the actors, there's pretty strong, we basically just have to manage it pretty delicately. And so that's why doing it automated, wouldn't necessarily be an option.
Tom?
So, with that amount of assets, is there possibly a sort of requirement for deduplication? Is there a risk of flooding your asset repository with exactly the similar images because you didn't realize somebody else has just submitted the same workflow for an image? Or are the shows so segmented that that's very unlikely to happen?
They're pretty, I mean, each show is separated to its own Alfresco share site, and the number of editors are pretty limited.
To one.
To one.
So
American Idol and X Factor have an overlap of content editors, and so they've been pretty self-managed on not duplicating effort and uploading multiple images. Tom?
Rights management. Is that stored as metadata within the images, maybe as XMP or something?
That's something that we probably want to work towards. I think particularly as we're looking to create more shareable content within the galleries, something like watermarking once it's distributed out, things like that. That's probably the next step that we need to move towards.
So the current form for photos has a very limited set of metadata that's applied to it. Date uploader, date published, name, description, tags, categories that you can add to it. But it's pretty easy to extend that to the out-of-the-box EXIF data that Alfresco's point out, or add additional fields to that metadata to allow for rights management. And, should this one be watermarked and this one not, that type of stuff.
Maybe you mentioned it already at the beginning of the talk. How many images do you have in total in the system, and what's the growth daily or annually or whatsoever?
That's a very good question. American Idol had somewhere around 7,000 images on it. So you figure that's 7,000 images times 144 apiece. And then subsequently, you've got all the other shows on the box. You've got X Factor and So You Think You Can Dance and other reality shows that have a higher level number of photos than your drama series.
I guess that sort of leads to a question of what's your strategy moving forward? Pardon me. As the years progress, like how do you sort of de-accession with all these iterations? You won't need them, with the rapid change of technology in 3 years from now or 4 years from now. So many of those iterations are basically disposable. Like how do you plan on managing sort of once you get into those millions of iterations where?
Well, I think part of that, the iterations are disposable, but reality is the shows go away as well. So it's about managing content. I think they came out and said that Glee, this is the last season of Glee, so it's been, I think this is the 4th year. So, a lot of the content changes, the platform needs change, and those sunrise and sunset as well. Our goal as we move forward is really to kind of standardize those iterations and those asset sizes across platform as much as possible. Not to the extent that it's like Microsoft Metro where it's one standardized size, but really kind of take that into consideration across all platforms as a UX exercise.
Hi, I was watching I saw a talk earlier that described kind of different marketing techniques and understanding the source of your users. From a front-end perspective, do Fox do much of that kind of capturing the marketing data and where users are coming from and what kind of users are looking at given assets?
We do look at, obviously we are very research-oriented. From your classic standpoint of demographics and who's going to watch, what show. But then on the digital side as well, it does allow us to see a different depth of, measurement that you normally wouldn't get just from, research panels and things like that. We do use that information to understand certain things. Some of it is also just very anecdotal. American Dad and Family Guy are pretty popular shows on Xbox because that's your demographic, certain platforms would surprise you with the types of demographic. I think Roku is an interesting platform for the fact that when you walk into a store and you buy it for a specific reason, to stream content from it. So, a lot of people use it, and they use it in a lot more than other platforms. The connected TV space, I think people have them in their homes today, but haven't necessarily hooked them up because they have TV. But there are people who are starting to understand that there's ancillary content that, they can have access to directly in the set-top box. So all of that information has been helpful. It does help inform us on what platforms we should be targeting next, because each one of these is an investment. Some platforms, like when we launched on Xbox, we were part of their initial launch, and that relationship and figuring out what the platform was going to be, takes a lot of cycles. So.
It sounds like a lot of what your focus has been around the production of show sites, and you talked about how Glee, for example, is finishing as a show. Mm-hmm. But obviously, one of the natures of entertainment is that sometimes those shows can spawn stars that go on to have, big Hollywood careers. What is your approach to reusing the assets that you may have, so images around that, you don't know that they're a star yet, and then, they go on to do a Hollywood blockbuster, and then suddenly you find that you've got really important assets. What is your strategy around retaining that and making that available down the road?
We have none. We essentially own the rights for the current season, and it's to market the show for that season. A perfect example is we don't produce all the content that is on Fox. And a good example is NBC is the creator of The Mindy Project, but it's on Fox. Fox 20th produces Modern Family, but that's on another network. And 20th produces Homeland, and that's on Showtime. So it's not necessarily that we own all the rights for all the shows. The shows that we do create, like New Girl, yes, we own the rights. But for the majority of the content, it's in support of marketing the show for that current season. After that, the rights sit back with the studio, and they market the rest of it. So we really want people just to kind of watch the shows. Yeah.
That's it, Will. They're done out of questions.
Mm-hmm.